My guest today is Will, a flow coach helping people get unstuck and reconnect with clarity, momentum, and trust in themselves. In this conversation, we explore how he built a coaching business from scratch, the deep mindset shifts that changed everything for him, and why authenticity isn't just a buzzword, it's the foundation of his work. If you've ever felt stuck, second guess yourself, or wondered how to turn your experience into impact, this one's for you. Hey, Will,
How's it
you're a flow coach. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start by speaking from the standpoint of who it's for. Typically, what I encounter is there are lots of people in the world who tend to feel stuck in their lives. And a lot of the ways that they find themselves stuck is in how they may really intellectualize and very much overthink the choices in their life. And that has them broken down in all this labyrinth of different questions and thoughts of what they're supposed to be doing with their lives, or maybe they're in a job that they're not terribly happy with, but they they really don't feel this sense of drive and clarity to change that or shift that. They're just not really sure what to do. And it's helping them to see all the ways that they're thinking, all the ways that they're operating that may be contributing to that stuckness, and instead helping them to move into something that helps them stay in action and stay in flow and stay in movement, right? And so I might summarize that as moving them through a process where they learn how their effort and their discipline and consistency overlaps with their surrender to the results of that effort and consistency. And that overlap, somewhere in that overlap is what we might call flow, where you're not really forcing things to happen. You are you are setting an intention, you're taking clear action, and then you're trusting the results of those actions and making adjustments as you go along.
Okay, that's clear. So, in essence, you help people with experience less friction
That's
in
a great
life.
way to put it.
Is that correct?
That's a really great way to put it.
Okay. Okay. Nice. How did you get started with this? Was it something that you planned, like, I want to help people, and then you stumbled on this, or did it just
That's a
happen?
great question too. So I tell a lot of people this. A lot of how I got started with helping people who feel stuck is from me feeling stuck myself. And I spent the better part of my, I would say, teenage and into my adult life, more or less living out the same life patterns. There might have been a few fresh things. The main thing that might have changed throughout that time was maybe my beliefs, the way I look at the world, the way I understand my life and reality, and what choices I make, maybe morally and such. But when it comes to actually concretely changing how I live, what I do, not much shifted for me. And I lived with this sense of directionlessness and kind of fear that I couldn't really live authentically in the world. And I kind of had to settle for jobs for work that kind of seemed like it was somewhat what I wanted to do, but really wasn't it. And also felt that, I was fairly clear I wanted to be helping people in some way, but wasn't sure what form that could take. And most types of work in different types of jobs seem to only offer a certain amount of pay as well. So it's kind of a two different major things of like making a certain amount of money and also being able to love what I do. I mean, a lot of people would love that sort of holy grail of like, I love what I'm doing and I'm also making a lot of money at it. I'm getting to access more of my life, have more freedom because of my financial connection there. And so in a lot of ways, uh, I felt disempowered in my ability to access that. And eventually I got to a point where I was so fed up with it. I would have been moving to a place mentally where I would have been getting closer and closer to not wanting to be here, to be honest with you. Or I was going to have to start taking a bold step in a direction that I don't even know how it was going to work out. And so the way that looked was I met a couple couple men who were in this space of coaching and creating, who were living and expressing themselves in a very empowering and very inspiring way for me. The way they spoke about life, their values really, really drew me. And so I jumped into one of their workshops. It was about content. It was actually creating content for business. And I didn't even have a business at the time, but I just thought I could learn from this guy. And I was right, that I could, but it was just interesting. But that got me creating content and just trying to share. And it was such an awkward process for me, but I really just jumped into it. And it was through there that I also met the guy who's now my coach. And so meeting him and diving into that, making investment in coaching that was very much kind of a stretch for me financially, but still was like, it's kind of like that dive off the cliff, if you will, that I kind of felt like I needed to just really shake things up. An old client of mine said it's kind of like tossing grenades into your mind and just blowing everything up and just seeing what happens as a result of that. So that's kind of what it was for me. And so ever since then, it's just kind of been one bold move after another, while also having lots of
Mhm.
resistance and doubt sprinkle in, of course, throughout the whole journey.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That's an amazing
Mm.
story. And you start making content, you get your first customer or your first client. What then? How did you handle that
Such a
situation?
great question as well. For a long time, I was doing content without any clear aim. I was questioning myself on whether I wanted to be a coach, but I was making content that maybe a coach would make if he was wanting to grow a business online through social media. At least trying to. And so, kind of the way I moved into that was by allowing myself to let it be simple. I was allowing it to be simple. So like one thing is that I did right off the bat was, and this was partially by the guidance of my own coach, to be honest, and it was, I started to have conversations with people I knew, and I started with a simple question of, or introduction of like, hey, I had this business idea and I just want to run it by you. I want to get your perspective on what coaching is and what that's like. There, and so I would explore their answers, try to understand what their perspective of it was, and each conversation I had kind of provided material for the next conversation. I let each one kind of flow into the next one and kind of build on itself. And after 2 or 3 weeks of that, I had my first client, and it wasn't a paying client. It was a client. I was just like, hey, would you want to let me coach you just for practice and everything? And it wasn't, I did that for a little bit and continued to meet with people, continued to make content. It was probably a few months later that I finally decided, okay, like there's there's nothing really saying that I can't just go ahead and see if someone would be willing to pay me to be their coach. And so I sat down with someone and we talked through it, had a little consultation, and we made an offer. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm down. Let's do this." And
Mhm.
that point forward, it started to feel real for me. And also there's this process by which I still was only had like one foot partially in it, and like the rest of me was still kind of, do I really want to do this? And to me that's
Mhm.
so important to not only the journey, but like what kind of clients I work with who tend to really doubt themselves and not be really sure that they can make things happen in their lives. Like that was me while I was doing the thing. And I think that's just so important. I think a lot of us, we look at people who are driven and they're making things happen in their lives. We're like, well, they must not doubt themselves. We compare ourselves. Like,
Mhm.
it's really not true. I mean, the most, the most like inspiring people I've met, when I've gotten to know them, they're like, "Oh yeah, dude, like I had all these doubts and I still do today." It's not really about never having them. It's about like doing it still when you're like not sure. Like make the commitment first, and it tends to work,
Mhm.
and if it doesn't, you make it
Mhm.
you regroup and keep going. So yeah. I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. The commitment part resonates very hard with me because I have a coach
Yeah.
myself. We've worked on that, on the commitment to really get rid of the imposter syndrome feeling, however you want to
Mhm.
call it. But I think it's, and that helped me as well to really just make the commitment, just do it, and then whatever happens, happens. And that's something for me that makes it um, with less friction to take my actions, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
mm.
Uh,
Yeah, I think I hear you saying, so it's like, it if I sort of the normal friction I could have from all this thinking about it and worry about it, I can sort
mm,
of slip past that if I say, I'm committed to this, I dive into this, and then whatever thinking I might do is kind of in service to this thing I've already jumped into and made it happen. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Yeah,
mhm.
that's really
Yeah,
that's really cool.
at that point, it doesn't matter anymore if I have these doubts or if I have these thoughts because I already began.
Right.
And that's the most difficult thing. You just begin and then
Mhm.
the rest follows.
Yeah.
So amazing. You you started with creating content before being or becoming a
Yep.
coach. I noticed that you only create content on Instagram and TikTok, if that's
That's right.
right. What drew you to those platforms?
Primarily, it was just the platform through which I connected with a lot of these people that I was so inspired by. I noticed that the way they were operating, I was like, okay, I could see my way into doing it that way. I definitely wasn't like, oh yeah, I've totally got this. I'm gonna nail this. But it was just like, okay, so I see them do it that way. Let me just see, kind of, okay, let me try it. So it's really just been kind of following the first thing that makes sense to me, and that's kind of what drew me to it.
Mhm,
It's been pretty like step by step. I've had a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, will you please do long form YouTube content and stuff like that?" And perhaps down the road that might be a vehicle that's really really useful for the kind of service I want to be in. Haven't yet found it to be a necessary container, but it may become one, as well as like a podcast format and such. But for now, that's just kind of
mhm.
what is serving the process. To answer your question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. What were some early mistakes that you made on social media that you learned from?
Wow. It's such a great question. So many, man. Oh gosh. Yeah, I love that question. Let's see. So there are two major ones that come to mind. I was actually talking with a guy, he's another creator. He kind of wanted to kick some ideas around doing this yesterday, actually. So it was a major thing for me. The main mistake I made as a creator was to assume that the people I'm reaching think like me, which might sound obvious when you say it out loud, but it's like the thought process is like my headspace is in a certain area of like maybe I'm thinking about certain types of frameworks or areas of self awareness. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, the person I'm speaking to is thinking about the same exact things. And they're really not necessarily. And and there's this sense in which we use this metaphor when in that conversation I'm referencing where the metaphor is kind of like if you treat your viewer as though they've already come up to the door of your house and the door is open and they're wanting to come in, like that's already a few steps ahead of them. What the viewer is really like is they're scrolling on social media most of the time just looking for a dopamine hit because that's just what how it functions. And and it's kind of more like they're having a casual stroll on the street next to your house, and your job as a creator is to make it desirable and attractive to want to turn down the walk to your door because you're like, "Oh, what a cool house. Oh, and that guy, he's standing on his yard and he seems really nice, like, and he already said hi to me and he wants to talk to me and all this." Like, it's that sort of energy where the first few seconds of that video they see, oh yeah, like not only did you just draw my interest, so it seems like you're gonna this is gonna be a good use of my time, but I want to stick around and I want to come in and explore and hear more. I'm gonna come onto your page. I want to check all this stuff out. So I made this big mistake early on to think that they're already in the house, when really they weren't. And that was the main one. The other area I think was in feeling that I needed to like nail the language, get things perfect. Very much a perfectionistic thing, but like particularly in the area of language, I was I'm one who enjoys a broader vocabulary, and yet that's not the sort of thing that tends to really serve content, at least on the context of someone scrolling through things. Like, so keeping very simple language, mainly because it's digestible, it's welcoming, it's hospitable to the viewer. It has nothing to do to me with intelligence or anything like that. I think I think a lot of the people I speak with are incredibly articulate people, incredibly intelligent people. But the more simple my language has been, the more digestible it is, the more inviting it is, the more magnetic it is. So
Mhm.
that's been my experience with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are two main areas I would say.
I really like the first one of the first impression. It's so
Yes.
important. How did you change it? How did you go from thinking they were already in the house to I have to quote unquote like sell myself first to get them to enter?
I think a lot of it really had to do with learning to tune in to the felt experience of the person I'm speaking to. So when I make content, the first thing that comes out of my mouth probably needs to, in some way, draw them in by helping them understand, like, I get what their life is like. There are a few different types of hooks that exist, probably multiple, but like one of the ones and this is kind of plays into one of the mistakes I was making early on. I would always try to start with like some kind of interesting statement, like an intellectually stimulating idea. And for some people, like a small contingent of people, they may stick around and watch that. Like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Because they kind of want to stay in their heads and enjoy that. But the average person listening, they want to be connected with. And so one of the most like viral videos I made was one where I started off with the hook of if you are really self aware, but you also feel really stuck, meaning you know a lot about yourself, you know about your patterns, you know all these things about yourself, but you still can't seem to get yourself moving in the direction you want to go in. Well, those first few sentences for the people listening, they're like, you're talking about me. This is me. And then and I spend the rest of the video talking about how that breaks down, how there's a common pattern in those things. And there's two major patterns in that particular video. I talk about intellectualizing and rumination and describe those and put it in my own words as to what that means. And so for me, meeting them at the street, making it attractive to come into my house, like it started with like it's almost though it's maybe to extend the metaphor, it's like I see them in the street and something about my energy for them is so inviting that they're like, "Oh, I know it would be completely safe to get to know this guy and walk into his house." And it's like we've been friends all this time. He gets me. Okay, cool. And that's generally the space I seem to be operating from in content. I think there are some creators who, just to set up a contrast, I think clarify it more. There's some creators who operate off of conviction, and there's just this way in which when they speak about the things they believe, they might even say it in a way that's kind of loud or intense, but the viewer knows they're not being yelled at. They're being there's this conviction of like, oh yeah, like oh I like that conviction. Yeah, tell me more. Like I want to hear this. So that's magnetic too. So a lot of this has kind of been about tapping into a certain form of magnetism and charisma, I think, and one of those can be like an
Yeah,
empathy versus like a conviction or things like that. So,
I really like that because I saw your videos and I thought they were very
Mm.
authentic. Like it's just it's real, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't come off as um not per se scripted, but it comes off as it's really you.
Mm.
And I think that that's a very important part in building a connection with the viewer and eventually a follower. So I really like that, especially where you mention like it's a part charisma, it's a part energy. Are you aware of how you are at that moment? Like when you're making the first bit,
Yeah.
do you know what you're doing, or is it just like it's happening?
First of all, too, I really appreciate you seeing me that way and feeling authenticity from me and the content. That's so cool. Such a great question. Seems to be the theme there. Great questions. So it seems like contrasting how I used to approach content might be a helpful way to even answer your question. When I first started out, the primary area I struggled as far as the actual creation process was when I hit record on the camera because something in me in my body just totally contracted. And I was just like, oh crap, it's performance time. Like, and I wouldn't necessarily at first, it wasn't even a conscious thing at first. I just knew that I was stuttering, I was forgetting what I wanted to say, I was having to redo takes all the time. It was all this stuff that probably in a real sense, like may not have come across as authentic at that time. Might have come across as very performative, very much like Will's trying to sound a certain way so that he looks like, blank. So, and that's at least how I would have experienced it internally at that time. I had this continual frustration of there's this authentic, very like grounded version of me who I want to be showing up in front of the camera, but he goes into hiding whenever I hit record. Um, what it looks like now, there are a number of things that I stick to that allow me to show up the way that you may see now. Is the first one is I ask, who am I speaking to in this video? Like, what are they feeling? What are they going through? And I visualize that person. Sometimes that person is an old version of Will. So like I might picture like a Will who didn't know what I'm currently trying to get across to them. And I'm thinking about how does he feel, how disempowered he might feel, how just discouraged and I'm thinking about a specific moment he's in and I'm picturing him in that posture. And when I look into the lens on the camera, I'm imagining I'm looking him in the eye and speaking to him and trying to bring the energy that version of Will would need. And I might picture another version of him like that. That's one thing I'll do. So I'm thinking about who am I speaking to? The other thing is I'm I'm also asking like, am I in my body right now? Am I present? Do I notice I'm in my body right now? Um, I can easily get off into intellectualized versions of my message rather than like speaking from where I am and who I am. If that distinction makes sense.
Mhm.
And that I find that pulls me away from showing up in a way that feels very natural and authentic, even relaxed or anything like that. I get more and more out of myself and less present. Seems like there's one other cue that I use, but those are the two main ones. It's who am I speaking to, who am I in service to, and am I present? And that really helps me to stay grounded.
I get it. I really like the fact that you really take in your mind like who am I speaking
Mhm.
to? It just gives you like an invincible partner to just chat with, and that's how it comes across in the videos as well. So that's really amazing. Do you have like some kind of content strategy in place, or it's just very intuitive?
Great question. So for a long time, I would write scripts just on notes on my iPhone and stuff, and I would just would sort of break them up into sections that I figured would equal out to about 5 to 6 second clips, and I just put those clips together, and that worked to an extent. Some of my viral videos were made that way. I also found that that was where a lot of choppiness and struggle with like feeling like I had to be perfectionistic happened. And so here more recently, my process has been more hit record, know generally the points of what I want to say, and then trust myself to just say it and not need it to be perfect. And just try to stay in my body as I say those things. So I've kind of had a sort of been reworking my swing, as it were, with content and seeing what I can get away with as far as that goes. The script writing allowed me to ensure I said certain words in the video because there they are. I'm saying the words as they are. But again, I think there was something sacrificed there in the way of authenticity that I'm really trying to tap into now. So it's probably a little more intuitive, a little more organic now. There's intention there. And the intention and the structure may be around how tuned in I am to what I'm currently learning that I want to be sharing with others, and what I have learned that probably could use a revisit, and just what my clients and even my ideal clients, the people in my audience, may benefit from receiving and hearing from me. And so my mind is usually processing those questions and then generating messages from that. Yep.
Would you say like that's where all your inspiration is coming from as well, to get the topics to post from your own learnings, but also from client
Yes,
discussions?
absolutely, absolutely, and just conversations with people in my life, and yeah,
Mhm.
past Will, current clients, people I know, and yeah, and then just sort of this avatar, if you will, this imagined ideal client. What are they going through?
Mhm.
What do they need to hear? Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good trick. I also do it when I'm writing copy for like clients. Then I really have like a total briefing. After that briefing, I just close my eyes for 5 minutes and I really look at the person, like what is he doing or what is she thinking, everything. And then it's so much easier to start writing because you're writing to one
yeah.
person and not to 250 people at once. So that's really amazing. Now, obviously, you're creating content with one of the goals to turn those viewers into clients. How do you do it?
How do you turn them into clients? There have been a lot of different ways that's looked for me. A lot of it is the degree to which I'm capturing the felt experience of the client in the content in the way that draws conversation. The most here's just kind of a sort of a framework that I've been encouraged to look at things through is in this framework, you have like someone who you might call stage one, who is not really aware of there being a problem in their life and not really interested in there being a problem. And I'm not really even speaking to those people with my content, but there's this space I could operate in where I'm trying to get someone to pay attention, convince them, and that's sort of like I'm staying in this pocket of trying to convince people, and I don't really know that that's useful. But then you go into stage two, there's
Mhm,
someone who's aware that there's a problem, but they don't know the extent of the problem. They're really trying to, they have a sense of awareness of like stuck somewhere, I'm struggle with this or that. And if you can speak to what they feel the problem is and then help them understand the problem even more, that develops a sense of trust in you as an authority with that. And those are the kinds of people that when they watch my content, they're probably going to comment and go, "Oh my God, like I've never heard someone put it like this. That's crazy." And if they stick around, they give it a follow, they're going to keep watching content. They're going to continue to like learn from you. And, and then that might turn into further comments and a connection and DM. So there's kind of this ongoing relationship. There's several followers I've had like multiple conversations with over time, and a number of those have just gradually converted into a client relationship. My mindset towards all of that is to constantly think. So when I'm speaking with an individual, I am asking myself, what way of contributing to or interacting, yeah, what way of contributing to this connection, of interacting in this conversation is in service to this person? What helps them move forward in the ways that they're telling me they want to move forward? That might be momentary advice that's just I just offer, or just ways of interacting or empathizing in the message. And that might look like, hey, it really sounds like you want to make some shifts. And one of the big things that you could do for that is to explore whether or not the coaching I offer is a fit. It would be great to just at least connect with you and see if that's true. And if nothing else, maybe the phone call gets to give you some direction. And so the consultations I do with people are really designed around helping them further clarify what they want from their lives and how they see themselves wanting to go about doing that. And I've had a number of people I speak with, or it turned out not be a fit, or there's a no, and they're just like, but I still really appreciate this conversation, and I feel like I gained a lot from it. And my my mindset is typically I want people to feel that I'm giving them more than like kind of a sense of like even with my content and even with my conversations that they almost wonder if they're sort of robbing me by because of what I'm giving them. I just want to operate it. So it's maybe a very summarizing answer to your question is like I try to operate out of generosity and service. I just think that works. It's a really fun and like easy energy for me to operate within, and it just connects with how I want to be anyway. So it's like instead of me having to flip into this, okay, it's time to promote my business mode. It's like, well, just how do I want to live as a human anyway? And I just how can I be that human with these people? Which brings you that's where you start meeting stage 3 and stage 4 people who are like, they know the problem, they probably learning more about the problem from you. And those people are like, yeah, you're the obvious solution to the problem. And so like when I'm finally emotionally or mentally ready or finally get that push maybe from you in a conversation with you, Will, yeah, I'm a yes. I want to work with you, So yeah, so that's typically
Yeah,
what you see there. Really long answer to your question.
it's a good answer. It's like the I don't know how to pronounce it correctly in English, but it's like the reciprocity
Yeah.
rule, uh, where you give and people eventually have the feeling like, shit, he is giving me so much. I need to give something in
Mm,
return.
mm,
And I think that's what I'm not going to say consciously or subconsciously are doing right
mhm,
now, and it clearly works. What happens when they slide in your DMs? What happens over there? You have a conversation first, or you immediately hop on a call together? What's next?
mm. It really depends on what's happening in that conversation. So there are a few different scenarios I could speak to. The common like more ones that probably just end up being conversations, and that's it. It's like someone who comes into my DMs and says, "Hey, thank you for what you post. I really appreciate it. It's really helpful." And I just go, I'm so glad it's helpful to you. And I might try to ask a question like, "What's that? Um, what are you noticing it's helping you with? What does that? How's that showing up in your life right now?" And that generally like just the choice to move the connection forward in some way is what reveals to me what opportunities actually are there. And that might turn into like, yeah, well, to be honest with you, it's all this and this, and I have that. Oh, really? What is that like? Is that really bogging you down here? So it's sort of like move that forward in a way where I'm like, okay, so it seems like you're in a place where you have this. So I'm just curious, like, would you be interested in have you been wondering what it would be like to work with a coach, or are you interested in, if you're not opposed, I'd love to sit down with you and talk to you about what it would look like, whether we're a fit. I mean, does that seem interesting to you? And, if I get a yes, then we set up a call, and everything. There are other people who just come in and say, I want to know what it's like to work with you. And that's it's just like, okay, cool. Yeah. The simplest way to do that is here's my process. Let's set up a consultation. Let's make it happen. Oh,
That's very easy. Yeah, the second
yeah.
ones are
Yeah.
amazing.
That seems 3 and 4 people. Yeah, for sure.
How did you decide how your offer or program would look like? Because you do one-on-one coaching. I can imagine that not every person needs the same. How do you handle that?
Yeah. Yeah. As far as like the way it's structured, not everyone needs the same structure and everything. Is that what you're kind of where your head's at?
Mm. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things I tell people when we're having conversations or discussing moving into a consultation is I say that I tailor each relationship to the needs of the individual client. And that goes down to structure and that goes down to even the fee I might quote them or something like that, right? But a lot of that is built off of feel, and I also have some sort of basic structure that I tend to operate by. That is, I always tell clients this, or people who are interested in being clients this. I say, when I first started out as a coach, one thing I was really clear on is that I wanted my clients to feel that I was walking alongside them on the journey, not like, "Hey, here's a session, here's a coach, cool, see you later. Hope you're fine. Like, we'll see you in a little while." Like, it was like, no, I'm
Mhm.
here with you the whole time. Like, if you need me, if you want to make use of my support, I'm here. And so I thought that the way that would happen, just kind of as a new person, like really thought that was going to happen through weekly 1 hour calls. And I found that was too frequent for a lot of people. And it just people would come in and like, "Oh, yeah, I kind of still haven't moved forward on that. I kind of need a little more time. But life happened. My kids had needs or whatever it may be. And um, so because I wanted to preserve that quality of me walking alongside them, I I opted for a structure where we still have scheduled calls, but they're once every other week. And in between, I highly encourage my clients to reach out in between sessions. And that's probably primarily first through messaging. And then that probably gets to become additional calls. And that's part of the reason I tend to structure it from a monthly perspective rather than a per session fee, because I want the client to feel, okay, we have th- the cost, everything settled. It's cool. I'm free to utilize Will's support as much as I need to. And so the result, hopefully, or at least intended to be, we have this structure for the sake of consistency within which there's a lot of room to respond dynamically to needs, at whatever level of need that is. It might be a lot of need during a particular month, or it might be like, nah, I've been good this whole time. Here's an update, but I've been rocking and rolling, and I'm excited about that next call. Let's do it.
Mhm.
So it just kind of varies. So
What has been the hardest part of growing your coaching business up until this point?
probably the hardest part is seemingly ends up being the same thing each time. I think, and it's the fact that I will be trying something new that I haven't tried before, and I'm uncomfortable with that. So it's one of the main areas I want to expand into this year is with group coaching and offering courses. And boy, has there been so much resistance around that. But that's the resistance I found with one-on-one coaching. There's as many reasons as we may have to want to do something, our mind can invent reasons not to do it. And so my main challenge has been in catching myself when I'm really just the hurdles that I perceive to be there may be generated from fear rather than from a place of discernment and wisdom about the logistics of the thing. It's much
Mhm.
more often the first one than the second one. Much more often.
Mm.
And, yes, I'd say that remains my number one challenge. Maybe on a more practical or concrete level, I mean, that's practical too, but on a more concrete level, I think it's continuing to refine how I'm connecting with my client, being more and more and more clear. And when I say that's a challenge, it's not like a challenge that I feel like I'm losing at. It's more of a challenge of I don't know that that ever ends. You continually get more and more refined on who you're in service to, is my sense. And and that does involve a lot of like, maybe it's this. And you're like, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not who it is. That's not how I'm trying to communicate or how I'm trying to market or whatever it is. And you're just constantly in this process of getting better and better at reaching that client. And that's probably those two
Mm.
things right there. Yeah. My own self resistance and then just getting better at meeting them. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Amazing. The fact that you're feeling uncomfortable quite a lot, that's a good
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah.
So just keep chasing that
Yeah,
feeling, and then everything will work out.
absolutely.
If someone is just starting out, what's your best advice for building a coaching business with organic content?
Oh, with the content specifically, or just in general?
You can answer without a
Yeah.
with if
Yeah,
you'd
let's do
like
both.
to.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so just organic, just in general, building a coaching business, just straight up. Uh, just do something is the main thing. So it's like I mentioned earlier, my start was just to have conversations with people. Let it be simple. Let it be haphazard. Let it be what may feel messy to you. I was just speaking with a client before this. He was like, I'm resistant to making content because I feel like what I create is just going to end up being random. I don't have a plan. I'm not clear of how I'm going to string it all together, and I might confuse my audience. And what we realized as we kind of began to parse that out is that that was another form of intellectual resistance. It's like, oh, it has to be this perfect thing. Then we are much more cohesive as beings than we give ourselves credit for. We have so much more of a method to our madness if we just allow ourselves to trust the intention that we act on. And we got clear on like who is it he's reaching for this content? What does he want to create? What does he want to what are the results he wants to have? And I'm like, and who's he reaching? And like if you can keep yourself focused on the service to those people, whatever you create in that space, it's going to follow a general stream, a general pattern. So allow it to be simple, allow it to be haphazard, allow it to be a little messy. It's okay. It's in fact, that's if you ever want there to be more really, really tight, cohesive look to it, just because you feel like that's in service to your people, that's going to happen from you doing the thing first and learning what that feels like for you to be there. That's my first sense. As far as content itself goes, it's a similar vein. Be willing to experiment, play with stuff. One major area there that I was super resistant to for a long time was paying attention to trends, paying attention to what people are doing and seeing what works. Um, Not being afraid to even, in a way, copy things, like mainly like hooks and things like that. Like there are lots of people, nobody has a monopoly on that stuff. Like it's just how it is. And so,
Mm.
if something worked, if it grabbed you, you're like, holy crap, I want to listen to what this person said. Use the hook, try it out. The worst that can happen is that it doesn't work and you just try something else. You know, your willingness to take risks and to keep going is what's going to make the difference. Is the output and you learning through those reps. It's going to really, really build it for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's very nice. I like the copy thing, especially if you copy it and still make it your own because of who you are and the energy that you bring to the conversation. Let's say you're completely starting from scratch again. What would you do differently?
If I was starting from scratch, what would I do differently? Like with a fresh account and everything. There's nothing I'd do differently from my current process. But if I were to like restart and maybe bypass the mistakes or the things I would do differently from my early stages, Will, of this thing, I think I would just I would post a lot of stuff. I would I would be willing to just show different sides of myself. I would be willing to just do whatever is necessary to try whatever is necessary to get a person to reach the person who needs to be reached. And I really try to think about my work as when I speak about service, I speak about it from a standpoint of I really think that what I get to give to people is something that there are people who really need it. They really, really need to receive this stuff. And even their participation through their investment in coaching is something they may need, and maybe something that, and so I, even when it comes to fees and cost and all that stuff, like for me, I try to make that conversation about them, not about like, oh, I get
Mhm.
my pay and all that stuff. Like, I just feel like I can function more freely in that space. And I would channel that same mindset into my content. A lot of my content early on was very driven by my fear, like without me knowing it, but driven by my fear of like, what am I looking like? How am I coming across? And I would just have myself focusing a lot more on what do they need, and what do I want to give, and focusing on that. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Amazing. Very valuable.
yeah,
Okay. My my last question for you, Will, where can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
absolutely. So, my handle on Instagram is will.pesh, Pesh. And it should be the same handle on TikTok as well. Those are my platforms right now. No specific website to point them to per se, but those are my pages that you can go to. You can feel free to shoot me a DM and connect and learn about what's going on. Check out my content. I love engagement in the comments. Like I love having lengthy conversations in the comments. It's really fun for me. So yeah, I'd really love to have y'all. So
Okay. Amazing. Thank you very much for your
yeah,
time.
absolutely. I appreciate you having me on and everything. It's really cool. I appreciate your questions, and it's really cool seeing what you're doing, trying to kind of bring some awareness of these practices and stuff. It's cool.